COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
So as of right now, the official count in this country is 1,100 cases of coronavirus. That figure is growing quickly. In Italy, which experts say is only a few weeks ahead of where we are in the development of the outbreak, the entire nation is tonight on lockdown. The disease has killed almost 200 people in Italy in just the past 24 hours. Markets are responding to this. The Dow dropped almost 6% today. The NCAA announced that March Madness, the basketball tournament, will be played without fans in attendance this year, and that ought to tell you something. Schools are closing across the country, and so on. Our show is a graphic at the very bottom of your screen with the many closures and cancellations already in effect. Now, you may be wondering as you watch this, could this be an overreaction? All of it. So far, relatively few people have died in this country. But before you reach that conclusion, consider this. With the average annual flu, the one that goes around every year, every person who gets the virus spreads it to a little over 1.3 people. In the case of this virus, the coronavirus, that number is almost double. Left unchecked, every infected person affects more than 2 people on average. Of those who get the typical flu virus, about 0.1% die. So far in the United States, the coronavirus death rate appears to be over 2.5%, though experts say with undetected cases, it could go down. But that's small comfort. To be clear, this is a virus that spreads twice as easily as the flu and is likely to be at least 10 times deadlier. It's not something to take lightly. The country needs a clear plan to protect its people. Decisive action in China and South Korea appears to have kept the virus somewhat under control in those countries and saved lives. One of the reasons Americans may have missed the significance of this virus is because, unfortunately, it came enmeshed with politics. On television, talking heads have wasted hours upon valuable hours yammering not about the virus and its potential victims, but about how it's racist to tie the coronavirus to China, where it came from. Please. Now is not the time to indulge in the lowest and dumbest kind of identity politics. In times of crisis, euphemisms kill. You need accuracy and clear language in the way you talk about the threat. It's essential. And yet ingrained habits are hard to break. And among our professional class, no habit is more deeply ingrained than seeing the world through the lens of race, which they do. When Congressman Kevin McCarthy tweeted information about the Chinese coronavirus, Ilhan Omar responded this way, quote, "Viruses don't have nationalities. This is racist." Oh, shut up. But at MSNBC, they're not shutting up. They gave the very same lecture.
Now, I want to ask you about the back and forth between Democratic Congresswoman Grace Meng and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. And she is demanding an apology for him referring to the virus in very derogatory, offensive terms, calling it the Chinese coronavirus. What is your reaction to that? Some have even called it the Wuhan virus, and obviously a very insensitive terminology there. But what do you make of Kevin McCarthy using that terminology?
I'm disturbed by it. It's an American problem now, and we have to have an aggressive American response.
Offensive and racist. These people are a joke, and they are, more importantly, a distraction. China is watching all of this. The Chinese government knows that identity politics is America's greatest weakness. It divides us. It makes us stupider. In times of crisis, it may even paralyze the national will at essential moments. It could do that now. So Beijing has joined the chorus, denouncing the West as racist for noticing where the virus came from. Chinese embassies are now openly claiming the virus may have come from somewhere else, not China. And the propaganda is working. Just a month ago, the American media thought nothing of calling the virus what it actually is. Watch this.
The Wuhan coronavirus has now surpassed the 2003 SARS outbreak.
The first U.S. case of Chinese coronavirus was confirmed at one of her hospitals.
Inside that building is the world's first lab-grown copy of the Wuhan coronavirus outside mainland China.
The Chinese coronavirus death toll has jumped to at least 26 people.
The death toll from the Wuhan coronavirus spiked today.
The Chinese virus, the coronavirus that is worrying the whole world.
This comes as the Chinese coronavirus death toll has jumped to at least 26 people and sickened at least 835 people.
They'll deny those tapes exist. That's not how they're describing it now. Why? Because China told them not to. And the media were happy to comply. And, by the way, to downplay direct threats to this country from China, articulated out in the open clearly in print. Just last week, China's official news service warned, ominously, that it might cut off drug exports to the United States in order to intensify the epidemic and cause even more deaths here. Keep in mind that China makes 97% of the world's antibiotics. What would happen if they cut off the supply to this country? Many would die. So our country's greatest rival is denying reality about a plague they unleashed on the world and is then openly threatening to kill American citizens in our country. This is happening right now. Our news media are ignoring all of it, which tells you which side they're on. Stephen Mosier is president of the Population Research Institute and author of Bully of China, Why China's Dream is the New Threat to the World Order. He joins us tonight. Mr. Mosier, thanks so much for coming on. So speculate, if you would, why do you think the American news media are covering for China and obscuring its connection?
Because that's how they stay in power. It was only weeks later they told the Chinese people, 5 million people by then had left Wuhan, not knowing, some of them, that they were carrying the virus, and they carried it to all parts of China and all parts of the world. This is a made-in-China epidemic. You know, calling it the Chinese coronavirus simply refers to its country of origin. But if there was ever an epidemic that deserved a country of origin label, it would be the made-in-China China coronavirus, or let's call it more properly, the made by the Chinese Communist Party coronavirus epidemic, because that's what it is.
So what you're saying is, as the virus began to explode in China, the Chinese leadership put political imperatives first in locking down the military, as you just said. How is that different from what our media are doing now? People are dying, World Health Organization declares it a pandemic, and their first concern is that you not be allowed to describe it accurately. My jaw's open.
Yeah, it really is a matter of putting politics first, and you would think that we would put transparency first, we'd put information and facts first,
Exactly.
we'd put curing people first. But why are some people in the United States putting politics first? I can understand why the Chinese Communist Party does that, because they've always done that. They held a meeting in January, the China National Health Commission, in which the head of the Health Commission said, our primary goal, he said, is to put politics first, which means protecting the Chinese Communist Party, to quarantine second, which means segregating from society people sick, and then maybe we'll find a cure. That was a distant third. We should have those in reverse order. We should do the cure finding, and we should do the transparency and quarantining people first. Politics should not even be a part of this, Tucker. We should all be, as Americans, working together to fight this crisis.
I agree. I want to ask you one brief question. The Chinese official daily, just a few days ago, threatened to shut off the supply of pharmaceuticals and medicines in the United States in the hope that it would kill millions of Americans, and I think that it would if that were to happen. Should we take that threat seriously?
Yeah, absolutely. China has as its strategic plan unrestricted warfare against the United States across all domains, except the kinetic. I mean, we're not shooting bullets at each other, but in all other domains, right, intellectual property and so forth, they're in competition with us. They want to be number one. They want to replace us. And so we have to see every dependency upon China, whether it be for medications or for steel or anything else, as a potential weakness that the Chinese Communist Party will exploit to their advantage when they decide to do so. Yeah, you would think nobody in the world would ever deny millions of Americans medications that keep them alive and cause their death. Well, yes, they would. They've actually threatened to do that.
Yes.
So we need a hard decoupling of the U.S. economy from the Chinese economy. And hopefully the China coronavirus, again, the China coronavirus will be the wake-up call that tells the world that you cannot depend upon the People's Republic of China.
Right. I think if the average American knew how many Pentagon officials in Washington went to work for China, directly or indirectly, after retiring, they would be astounded. I've seen it. Mr. Mosier, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Well, increasingly, events, public events, big ones, are shutting down in this country in order to contain coronavirus. Chief Breaking News correspondent Trace Gallagher has more on the very latest closures. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, the two big coronavirus headlines are the World Health Organization, which for weeks had resisted calling it a global pandemic, has now done so. But the Director General of WHO says he believes countries can still change the course of the disease. And Dr. Tony Fauci with the National Institutes of Health told Congress today things will get much worse if we're complacent. He also recommends banning large gatherings, including NBA games. And because the NBA has now notified teams to prepare to play with no fans. In fact, San Francisco has already already banned large gatherings, so tomorrow night the Golden State Warriors will play with no fans. Also, the NC2A announced today college basketball games, including March Madness, will have limited fans, meaning staff and family. Then there's education. Washington State Governor Jay Inslee today closed Seattle schools for 2 weeks. And at least 75 major colleges and universities will move their classes off campus and online. Harvard, Penn State, Florida State, Berkeley, just to name a few. Coachella and Stagecoach festivals in Southern California have been moved to the fall. Pearl Jam postponed its 17-day tour. The St. Patrick's Day parades in Boston, Chicago, and New York canceled. And the Group of Seven, or G7 meetings scheduled for Pittsburgh later this month will now be virtual meetings. Tucker.
Amazing. Profound even at this stage. Trish Gallagher, thanks so much.